One external wall system forms that were introduced after the Grenfell tragedy to assess whether or not a high-rise building with cladding was safe. Now, these forms are crucial. Banks require them. They won't supply a mortgage to any flat in a building without one. And obviously, if you fail one of these forms, if the chartered surveyor who surveys your building finds that there is a problem with the cladding, well, then you're trapped for years on end and you face astronomical fees and bills to try and fix the problem. So these are really crucial. There's so much at stake. And last month, 33-year-old Thomas Clark, a man from Rainhill in Merseyside, pleaded guilty to fraud by false representation. And today he received a 15-month custodial term, suspended for 2 years. He was accused of sustained fraud with significant degree of planning after he forged these certificates. Now, on background, Clark, he had a gambling addiction. He'd been contracted as a third party by a company called Specialist Facade Inspections Limited to survey these buildings. But he didn't have the right credentials. Only a very small, specific number of people in the country are actually able to do this work. So instead, he used the name of an ex-colleague, a woman called Sophie McGee, who had no idea what he was doing. He picked her name, he created a fake email address for her, and he forged her signature. I actually spoke to her during the investigation in 2020. She told me she was horrified in the June when residents of some of these buildings started contacting her, seemingly out of the blue, querying her credentials and the work on these forms that they'd received. She also said in her victim personal statement as this went through court that she'd suffered significant stress as a result of Clark's lies. He ended up signing off a total of 55 forms for 55 buildings throughout the country in her name. He made himself £6,000 in the process while suffering with gambling addiction, and he provided the victims with these worthless forms. Now, as he was sentenced today at Liverpool Crown Court, the recorder, Andrew McLaughlin, said the only reason he's not going to prison is that none of the forms were factually incorrect. So therefore, the residents of the properties can at least be reassured. The defence, Michael O'Brien, said that Thomas Clark made the wrong decision at each and every turn. He's offered no excuses for his behaviour, and he did, of course, plead guilty. While the company who'd contracted him as a third party, SFI, told me today on the phone they really feel relief at the sentence. They say they're grateful this is over and that they have learnt their lessons.
LBC's correspondent Rachel Venables there. More on this over on our website, lbc.co.uk.
Where the news never stops. LBC News.
There are calls for strong action on racism after a Tottenham player had a banana thrown at him on the pitch. And while we'll be missing one athletic star from this weekend's London Marathon. With more, LBC's Alison Spooner has the sports headlines.
FIFA's investigating after Tottenham forward Richarlison had a banana thrown at him after scoring in Brazil's 5-1 friendly victory over Tunisia in Paris. He's warned racism will continue happening every day and everywhere unless strong action's taken. Piara Power is from Football Against Racism in Europe. He's pleased the player and his teammates have spoken out.
The message from them is that this is wrong and they're expecting action. That is a sort of driver to action that we're seeing these days. Players have a voice. They have a platform and they're using it, as we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years, in a way that we've never seen before.
England's women's rugby union team will play their first standalone fixture at Twickenham in the 2023 Six Nations. They'll face France there in their final match at the end of April. And Mo Farah has withdrawn from Sunday's London Marathon through injury. The four-time Olympic champion who won the big half in the capital earlier this month has a hip problem. He says he's done everything he can to be on the start line, but the issue hasn't improved enough.
LBC News. The latest news headlines next.
UK Export Finance can help your business grow overseas. Last year, we helped UK exporters access £7.4 billion of support by providing government-backed finance and insurance. We can help you win export contracts with attractive finance terms. Got orders overseas? Fulfil them with a working capital loan. Exporting to a challenging market? Make sure you get paid with the right insurance.
To get the exporter's edge, search UK Export Finance or call us on 0800 538 5111.
What should I do if I can't pay my energy bill?
It's a question a lot of people are asking right now, which is why the British Gas Energy Trust is here to help. Through charity partners, we're offering extra support to customers who need it most, including free energy grants of up to £1,500. To find out how we can help you, and for more straight answers, search British Gas. British Gas, here to solve. Subject to eligibility.
On your radio, on global player, and
Play LBC News,
where the news never stops. This is LBC News.
From Global's newsroom, I'm Simon English. The government has ruled out a U-turn on Friday's tax-cutting mini-budget, while it's understood the Chancellor won't resign despite growing pressure. The Bank of England was forced to launch a surprise government bond-buying programme worth £65 billion to prevent a financial crisis. Labour's leader, Sir Keir Starmer, is urging the Conservatives to change its financial plans, saying they've lost control.
And for what? For uncosted tax breaks for those earning hundreds of thousands of pounds. And so what the government needs to do now is recall Parliament and abandon this budget before any more damage is done.
Hurricane Ian has hit into Florida, bringing winds of around 150 miles an hour, which are ripping up trees and roofs. Storm surges are also causing flooding. Around 2 million customers in the southwest of the state are without power. US President Joe Biden is urging people to listen to authorities.
The storm is incredibly dangerous, to state the obvious. It's life-threatening. You should obey all warnings and directions from emergency officials. Don't take anything for granted. Use their judgment, not yours.
A search operation is underway off the coast of Florida for 20 people after a boat sank during the hurricane. The vessel was taking migrants from Cuba to the US. Windsor Castle and St George's Chapel are reopening to the public for the first time since the Queen's death. Visitors will be able to see Elizabeth II's final resting place. From Global's newsroom, you're up to date.
LBC News. Weather.
Sunny spells this evening before rain returns in the early hours of Thursday morning. I'm Holly Harris. I'll have a full forecast in 15 minutes.
LBC News. Travel.
Starting off in Kent on the A282 anti-clockwise, the police incident still ongoing there between the M25 at the Dartmouth interchange and Junction 1A at Bob Dunn Way. You still have the overnight closure in Dagenham on the A13 outbound between the Goresbrook interchange and Marsh Way. That's for overnight works and it will remain closed until 6 a.m. If you're on the A61 Penistone Road in Hillsborough, that's closed due to a police incident at Bamforth Street. You do have a closure in both directions. With the A34 northbound in Oxfordshire still closed there due to emergency repairs, you do have a clean-up of a spillage of diesel there after the accident between the Botley interchange and the A423. I'm Ryan Borthwick. That's you up to date with the latest. Your next updates in 20 minutes on LBC News.
This is LBC News.
I'm Rachel Gerrish and this is LBC News. The Chancellor is refusing to change his plans for tax cuts and higher borrowing. Despite warnings, our pension funds came just hours from collapsing earlier, meaning the Bank of England had to step in to help. The pound went into freefall after Kwasi Kwarteng's mini-budget on Friday. The markets have been spooked. The cost of borrowing's gone up as a result. Hundreds of mortgage products have been pulled from sale. So the banks had to buy £65 million of bonds. It's a type of loan which provides the government with cash. Our business commentator Victoria Scholar can explain a bit more.
It's announced plans to intervene in the bond market by temporarily buying an unlimited amount of long-dated government bonds from today until the 14th of October. And this is in its attempt to try and at least offset some of the volatility and sell-off that we've seen in the bond market. There's been creating quite a lot of chaos in financial markets, and the intervention has helped to lift bond prices and reduce bond yields, which move in the opposite direction, because essentially bonds are the way in which the government can borrow money, and investors can buy government bonds and receive a regular income in return for lending money to the Treasury. And the bond market has collapsed lately amid concerns about the rise in government borrowing that's likely to come about on the back of the Chancellor's plans. And one of the most alarming things about today is that we've heard that some of the UK's biggest pension funds warned the central bank that they were facing a cash crisis on the back of this bond market collapse, and pension funds have been massively under pressure, and we understand that that is one of the major reasons why we saw this intervention from the Bank of England today. And some economists saying that the bond market is in the midst of dysfunction with really poor liquidity and bad pricing.
Our business commentator Victoria Scholar there, who is head of investment at Interactive Investor. Well, it's understood that Liz Truss's cabinet's going to be asked to find efficiency savings in Whitehall budgets. I've not heard anything directly from the Prime Minister or the Chancellor on the chaos in the markets. Financial Secretary to the Treasury, Andrew Griffith, has spoken to my LBC colleague Ian Dale, though, and insisted that the planned tax cuts are the right move?
Look, obviously it's difficult times in the market, and that's not unique to the UK. That's something that we see in most of the developed world. As the long-term shock effects of Putin's war in Ukraine filter through, and we've seen that particularly on energy. So I think what the market is looking for is the bank to do exactly what it's done today, which is to make a timely and targeted intervention to ensure orderly financial markets, which is the job of the bank. That's done in close coordination with the Chancellor. And again, I think the markets want to and need to know that the Chancellor, the Treasury and the bank are working incredibly closely together, speaking multiple times a day to make sure that we run the economy and deliver stability at this important point in time. And then I think they need to step back a little bit and understand what the government's trying to achieve with the growth plan. And if you recall, it feels a long time ago, I know, but if you recall, what we announced on Friday was first of all to deal with the pressure that households, that your listeners right now are feeling on energy. Every household in the country will go to bed tonight knowing that we have capped their energy bills. Right now, the IMF
and they're facing massive mortgage rises. So what you did on energy bills is going to be cancelled out by the fact that many average householders are going to probably have double their mortgage payments by the end of the year.
And sad though this is, you know that interest rates are rising all across the Western world. This is not something that is unique to the UK. We're seeing this in all developed markets, some days different rates, but all markets are seeing that interest rate rise. Why are we seeing that? Ultimately, because of what has happened in Ukraine.
Financial Secretary to the Treasury, Andrew Griffith, speaking to my LBC colleague Ian Dale there. Well, Alistair Darling was Labour Chancellor during the 2008 financial crash. He's told my LBC colleague Andrew Marr the difference between these crises is that one is self-inflicted. He wants Parliament to be recalled to deal with it.
The ultimate exit route is a general election, actually, because the landscape has so changed post-pandemic, and then you've got this self-inflicted wound. I think we were never asked, the public was never asked whether or not we wanted what Liz Truss was arguing for during her leadership campaign. That was a decision taken by a very small proportion of the population that is in the Conservative Party. So that's ultimately that's the only way out. I fully understand why you've just got a new leader and you've just got a new Chancellor. But don't think many of the people who supported her would expect things to go so horribly wrong within a week or so of them taking over. Now, that's their problem, not mine. But, I think for the good of this country, because remember, these things take years sometimes to work their way out. The mistakes made in 1972 by a then Conservative Chancellor, it was 10 years before they were inflation was back under control at a terrible cost, with over 3 million people out of work. So, I think they have made a mistake. They're going to have to get their way out of it. I don't think they're going to get away with waiting for 2 months to tell us how they're going to do it. The sooner they do it and accept they've got to come out and explain themselves. And as I say, I readily see some of the things they can roll back, which might alleviate the situation. Yes, there'll be a loss of face, but, perhaps there's a bigger loss of face if they go on and get thrown out by the country. All the time that I was dealing with the crisis, 14 years ago, Parliament's the right place to explain yourself. So, I'm fully behind. I see Keir Starmer and others have been calling for Parliament to recall. This is a very serious situation. This is, it's unprecedented. Our borrowing rates are actually cost us more than Greece and Italy. We've had a rebuke from the IMF, which I can tell you from experience is very, very reluctant to criticise, big countries like ourselves. I think we're the biggest, we're the fifth or sixth biggest shareholder in the IMF. This is serious stuff, and there's no better place to explain what you're up to than in the House of Commons. It's probably a more useful thing to do than to go to the Tory Party conference, I would have thought.
Former Labour Chancellor Alistair Darling there. Well, it is 30 years to the month since Black Wednesday. It's when the pound collapsed and Britain had to withdraw from the European exchange rate mechanism. Ken Clarke was the Conservative Chancellor at the time. He's now spoken to LBC News and said the government has to act soon.
It is a serious crisis. It's an extraordinary crisis, politically as well as economically. But it's the economy and people's living that matters most at the moment. I've never known a budget cause a financial crisis like this. And I think the government and the Bank of England are still going to have to act to calm it down and get us back to normality before we work out how we're going to recover. I think the bank has really got to be ready to raise interest rates by a bit. I think they should have perhaps raised interest rates today. Not by some panic-causing big sum, not more than 0.5%, as some of the media have been suggesting. In my opinion, 0.5% would have been quite sensible, just to show that they genuinely were independent or going to act. I don't think they can keep saying that they're going to consider whether to raise interest rates in November. And again, the government needs to take a day or two, probably needs a week or two, for the Chancellor to sit down with some serious economic advice from the Treasury, but then make a clear statement of policy and intent. I don't think either of them can wait until November.
Former Conservative Chancellor Ken Clarke there. Well, the Lib Dems have compared the situation to a slow-motion car crash with the British public in the passenger seat. Labour wants last week's budget scrapped, they say, before any more damage is done. Sir Keir Starmer says he thinks the Prime Minister and the Chancellor are a danger to our economy.
It's a really very serious situation, and this is a self-inflicted wound. The government has lost control of the economy, and that's not some international event that wasn't expected. This is their deliberate decision. And why did they do it? For tax cuts for the very rich, and now there's a loss of confidence in what they have done. And so that's why they need to reverse the budget. They took a huge risk. They're like, two gamblers in a casino, chasing a losing run. But they're not gambling their money, they're gambling our money. And that's what's so wrong about this.
We'll, of course, have much more on this situation to come throughout the programme here on LBC News. But up next, we'll be taking a look stateside to Hurricane Ian. It's battering the southwest coast of Florida. There are warnings of potentially catastrophic storm surges. We'll get the latest in a moment.
LBC News.
Summer. Factor 50? Check. Soggy poolside boots? Check. A stylish SUV for sunny road trips? No problem. Skoda has you covered with the Skoda Summer SUV event. Save £500 on the Kamiq, £750 on the Karoq, and £1,000 on the Kodiaq. Summer is back on. Skoda. Orders placed with participating retailers between 15th of August and 30th of September and delivered by 31st of December 22. Retail customers only and excludes SE Tech for Karoq.
Across the UK, people are looking to save on their monthly bills. Switch and save over £200 versus BT on all Vodafone full fibre broadband plans. That's up to 5 times more reliable than standard broadband. From only £20 a month for 24 months. Switch and save today to get reliable broadband without the price tag. Vodafone.
24-month contract credit and availability checks apply. Comparison made against comparable BT plans. Terms of verification at vodafone.co.uk/broadband.
LBC News. Weather.
Heavy rain moving southwards from northeast England and down over the Midlands to the south coast through the night. In the early hours of Thursday, some heavy rain over southern areas of England and Wales. We'll also see some rain over southeast Scotland, but the rain clearing by mid-morning. On Friday, a band of torrential rain moving across the UK. From early morning, the heaviest downpours will be across Scotland, Northern Ireland and Western Wales. And then from mid-morning onwards, that heavy rain sweeping across the rest of England.
I'm Rachel Gerrish, and this is LBC News. Hurricane Ian is battering the southwest coast of Florida. There are warnings of potentially catastrophic storm surges, with the sea rising up to 8 feet above sea level in some areas. 2.5 million people were told to leave their homes. Well, Sharon Wynne is a reporter at the Tampa Bay Times. She gave us this update a little bit earlier.
This could end up being one of the biggest. The last big one was Michael 2 years ago that hit up in the Panhandle, was Category 5. This one was a 4, almost a 5 just as it hit landfall. It's slowing down rapidly. The thing is, in the Tampa Bay area, we haven't had a direct hit in 100 years. And so we just had another near miss here. So we're kind of breathing a sigh of relief, but feeling very bad for the people in the south part of the state. When Hurricane Charlie hit there, I think, what was that, 8 years ago? The whole area was, all the trees were just stripped and the roads were upended, and they had it was years of recovery from that. And that hurricane would fit in the eye of Ian. Ian is a much bigger, stronger storm. So we are afraid of a real buzzsaw is going to be cutting through Punta Gorda, Fort Myers, Naples.
Reporter at the Tampa Bay Times, Sharon Wynn there. Of course, keep you up to date with this storm throughout the programme on LBC News.
Where the news never stops. LBC News.
Russia is denying that it damaged 2 major gas pipelines in the Baltic Sea, calling the accusations stupid. The EU says it urgently wants to work out what happened to the underwater Nord Stream network. Before the war in Ukraine, it took gas from Russia into Europe. Well, our correspondent Trent Murray in Berlin's been hearing from the German Home Interior Minister, Nancy Faeser.
She has given a statement to the press saying the country must prepare for previously unimaginable threats to our energy security following that dramatic pipeline leak. And she's also blaming sabotage, saying we will need to adapt our scenarios in order to prepare for possible security issues. Now, that follows similar moves in Norway in the past few hours where we understand the military is stepping up.